Hello, I'm Stephen Matchett from Campus at Morning Mail, and this is Expert Opinion, where we ask people who know what's going on in education, what's going on. Expert Opinion is brought to you by Twig Marketing, Australia's original higher ed marketing consultancy. Got a brand issue, a message that isn't getting out? Talk to Tim Winkler, tim@twigmarketing.com. And thanks to producer Amanda Johnson from Twig, who makes Expert Opinion happen. OpenAI announced Mark 4 of ChatGPT on Tuesday. And as far as I can see, which admittedly is not all very far at all, but as far as I can see, it is a big improvement on 3 in that it uses more data to learn from, which will improve the accuracy of answers. For example, AI says that while Mark 3 passed an American bar exam in the bottom 10%, Mark 4 does it in the top 10%. But 4 has something else that seems to me in the longer term a bigger deal for learning and teaching. It now includes a Socratic style of dealing with questions. The example OpenAI uses is showing how to solve equations. So is there more to chat for education than just fabricating passable essays? Cath Ellis from the University of New South Wales at Sydney is here to talk about what she has come up with in day 3 of the new chat world. Professor Ellis is a long-standing expert on academic integrity and is closely watching in AI in education. Afternoon, Professor Ellis. Thanks for sparing the time. I know how busy you are.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
In January last year, you said, and I quote, AI is only going to get better, and the value proposition these tools will present to many, if not most industries, is going to be very compelling indeed. So now, a year on, how compelling is it for teachers and learners?
It's a very compelling proposition on 2 extremes. On the one hand, it's offering us a very attractive proposition or opportunity in terms of what it might be able to assist us in terms of being teachers, but also our students in terms of being learners. But at the other extreme, it's presenting a very real and present threat in terms of how we have done things for a very long time in terms of not just measuring learning outcomes through our assessment, but also in terms of what we think our students need to know, be able to do to be safe and productive practitioners and professionals in the world of work. And so that whole question of what does work mean now in a world where ChatGPT exists is under question.
Yeah, but one question that does come to mind is, has it, in terms of academic integrity, has it eaten the contract cheating providers? Has it eaten their lunch?
It's a really good question. I've been asked that a few times lately, actually. I think there's a lot of speculation out there as to whether this is going to actually be the thing that kills off the commercial contract cheating supply and possibly also the non-commercial contract cheating supply. Let me just break that down for you so it's really clear what I'm talking about here. Obviously, contract cheating is where a student outsources the work, not the learning, I'll come back to that, but they outsource the work of assessment to another person. Now, that other person therefore means that there's at least 2 people involved. It takes at least 2 people to tango when it comes to contract cheating. The providers of contract cheating can be loosely broken down into 2 main groups. Commercial providers, they're the ones that do it for money, and then the non-commercial providers, who mostly, we think, do it out of care or love or compassion for their friend, relative, whatever. Our research has shown that the bulk of supply is actually coming from the non-commercial providers, from parents, friends, family, students, former students. That's the bulk of the provision. The commercial side, of course, is what tends to come to people's minds. It's that availability heuristic that Phil Dawson talks about. That's really easy to bring to mind, the idea of the covert essay writing, ghost writing website, and offering the students these services and enter your credit card details and so forth. Somehow that's easier to bring to mind. But in fact, it's probably not the bulk of supply. In any case, the question that you put to me, and a lot of people are asking me, is ChatGPT going to mean the end of these things? I think in the long term, it probably won't. And I want to explain why that is. First of all, in terms of the contract cheating providers who are doing it commercially, their costs have just plummeted. they can also use this tool to help them generate essays or other assessment tasks to order more quickly, because it can do a lot of that kind of basic work for them. And I would also argue that quite a lot of the students who are currently relying on contract cheating services, and particularly commercial contract cheating services, don't have the wherewithal to get what ChatGPT 3 or 4 can produce and turn it into something that's of a good passable standard and defend it to an extent that a contract cheating writer could do. So I think on balance, in the long term, this is probably actually going to aid the business model of commercial contract cheating providers rather than do them out of business.
I wonder, is it also going to change in a lot of disciplines what we actually know, what needs to be assessed?
Absolutely. That's the crucial issue. A lot of people are coming to ask me for advice at the moment about what we should do. And my advice is, on the one hand, don't panic. This is not the existential crisis that I think a lot of people are making it out to me. But at the other extent, doing nothing is not an option. We really have come to a point where we have to do something. That, of course, leaves the burning question is, what should we do? And who should do the doing? And I think that that's the conversation that university leaders, as well as teachers and students, should be having with themselves at the moment. It's going to vary from institution to institution, from discipline to discipline, but that's exactly the question we should be asking and exactly the conversation we should be having.
But does that not lead to the arms race metaphor?
Not necessarily. The arms race discussion has been burning hot for years. Sorry, bad pun, but yeah, it's been burning hot for years. And it's often it's often raised when we talk about contract cheating, is that they figure out a new way to cheat and we figure a new way to catch them, and then they figure out a new way to cheat and then we figure out a new way to catch them, and on we go until the mushroom cloud is in the air. And I think, a lot of people have been talking about, and I have been one of the most vocal voices out there advocating for improving detection, particularly when it comes to contract cheating. I have been arguing for years that deterrence on its own is not enough, that we do need to be doing detection. I don't resolve from that position, but I'm arguing that we shouldn't do so by continuing down that arms race path. It's just going to lead to lots of despair and lots of unnecessary expense. The thing I'm really advocating for at the moment, which I've been advocating for years really, is in many ways what we should be doing in terms of thinking to change is to sweep away some of the techniques and the activities and the technologies and the tools that students are using to cheat, and focus our energies instead on what it is that we need to see students have learned. I'll come back to that point I put to one side a little bit earlier, Stephen, where I said contract cheating is when students outsource the work to another person. You remember I said I'd come back to that. I haven't described it, and I'm quoting directly from Phil Dawson again there. He has that as one of the affordances of cheating. Yeah, in his amazing book. I strongly recommend everybody have a look at it. But it's one of his 4 affordances of cheating is to outsource work to another person. Note he doesn't say outsource the learning, and that's because you can't outsource learning. It's one of those things, right, Stephen? You can't outsource your nutrition, you can't outsource your sleep, you can't outsource your exercise, you can't outsource your learning. And there's one thing that all of those things have in common: they're all embodied. You can't have somebody else learn something for you. You can't have somebody else learn how to play the piano for you. You can't have somebody else learn how to ski for you. You can't have somebody else learn to speak French for you. Learning is something that is fundamentally embodied. You cannot physically outsource it. But what's going on here is that students are outsourcing not the learning, but the work that we're asking them to do to demonstrate their learning. Rowena Harper's been talking about this a lot, Professor Rowena Harper from Edith Cowan University, about the fact that in effect what we're doing when we get a student to complete an assessment task is to create an artifact that represents their learning. It's not their actual learning, and we're using that to measure learning. So one of the things that I'm really advocating for at the moment is perhaps what we need to rethink is the reliance we're having or placing on artifacts of learning or artifacts to demonstrate learning. And maybe we need to shift our energies and attention, at least some of it, maybe most of it, onto having conversations with students about their learning. In other words, being able to see and for them to demonstrate the learning they've actually embodied.
I think you just gave DVC's conniptions there, because assessing that would cost a bomb of money.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
No? I mean, if you've got 500 people in a class and you need to assess them all individually and in person.
Which I do at the moment. I assess every single one of them individually, but instead of being in person, I spend time reading an artifact that they've produced.
Okay.
That can take me half an hour, 45 minutes.
So you don't outsource your sleep.
So instead of putting my energies into trying to secure every single assessment task, perhaps what I need to do is redeploy my energies somewhere else. So instead of spending the half an hour, 45 minutes reading a 3,000 word essay, perhaps what I need to be doing instead is having a 15-minute conversation with them. So if we think about it, it used to take me 30 minutes, 45 minutes to read, grade, put feedback on, and then administer a 3,000 word essay. If I can have the same and even a richer and more secure assurance of that student's learning through a 15-minute conversation, I've actually saved myself and my employer half an hour of my labour. So it's not necessarily that we need to do this on top of what we're already doing. Maybe what we need to do first is to stop doing some of the things that we've done because they're no longer working in terms of measuring student learning, and maybe we need to redeploy our energies somewhere else.
Which raises the supposition that I'm sure AI people would be able to answer and tell me it's not possible. How long until a conversational chatbot can ask the questions?
And this is where we get ourselves into one of those wonderful hypothetical situations that AI, and when I say AI, I mean academic integrity scholars have been talking about for years, is what if we get to the point where the robot writes the essay and the robot marks the essay, or even the robot comes up with the essay question, the robot writes it, and the robot marks it. Of course, once we're in that space, we're really starting to see the absurdity of our current practice of relying almost entirely on artifacts to measure student learning. Of course, we don't do it completely. Let's think about, for instance, the aviation student here at UNSW who needs to be able to demonstrate that they can safely land a plane. You can't contract cheat that. ChatGPT won't be able to do it for you. The music student here in my own School of the Arts and Media needs to be able to demonstrate that they can play the violin. You can't contract cheat that. You can't get AI to do that for you. So there will always be some fundamentally authentic tasks that can't be outsourced to another person or cognitively offloaded to a tool. Absolutely. But at the moment, a lot of our reliance on measuring and assuring student learning is on artifacts, whether it's an essay, a multiple choice quiz, a handwritten pen and paper exam in an exam hall with an invigilator walking up and down watching. They're all generating artifacts. And so that's perhaps what we need to rethink.
But is there not a discipline dichotomy here?
Absolutely.
Disciplines that basically have right and wrong answers, where you can measure. I mean, if you're an engineer, you can. If you're an historian, well, you know, it's an entirely different issue. This will work far better for disciplines with formal, fixed bodies of knowledge, which may change, but have right and wrong answers, as opposed to.
Possibly, yeah. And I think the thing that we're talking about specifically today is obviously GPT-4. Which is, how did you say 3 days old? I've lost track. It sort of landed, landed a couple of days ago. And what it can do is really just starting to dawn on people. But what you've talked about there is a really interesting or an important split between what you're referring to as measurement-based and then what we would probably refer to as judgment-based assessment decisions. So a measurement-based would be something like, is the answer right or wrong? And they're the sorts of things that we would traditionally have measured through, say, a true-false or a multiple choice question, something like that. Whereas judgment-based things, I guess, are more divergent. There are as many right answers as there are potential students to answer them. Whereas for the measurement base, there's one right answer and lots of wrong answers. I think that what we've really been able to see so far from GPT-4, which is, as we said, just a couple of days old, is it's getting increasingly good at doing both of those things. And remember, GPT-4 and the chatbot interface with it, ChatGPT Plus, which is what we're dealing with at the moment, is one of literally dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of AI tools available, and generative AI tools in particular, that are able to do text to text, text to image, voice to image, image to voice, text to voice, and so on and so forth. I mean, we've been worried about deep fakes for a while. So this is just one tool. There's an enormous amount of capacity out there for generative AI tools to do both that measurement-based convergent, where there's only one right answer, and the judgment-based divergent stuff. So I don't think any one discipline is particularly more threatened than the other. I think they're just differently threatened in different ways in terms of the techniques and that we've relied on to date to measure student learning.
And yet we're in a world where people, not as many as a couple of years ago, but people are still defending the traditional in-person lecture.
Absolutely.
Which in terms of stepping aside from ethics and indeed pedagogy, but just looking at the sheer economics of education, it does rather look like, in many ways, yesterday's argument, at least for a mass audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the whole idea of what we're doing when we deliver a lecture and how that facilitates student learning, acquisition of knowledge, acquisition of skills, the ability to apply knowledge and skills, I think that's been quite rightly questioned for quite a long time. In a world where our information cups are overflowing, does a live lecture presented by even the very best lecturer, even the most knowledgeable lecturer, is it really adding value to the students in terms of what they're able to walk away with in terms of improved knowledge and skills? Look, I've been questioning that for a very long time myself. And that's why a lot of teachers now are really shifting their emphasis away from knowledge transmission towards the more metacognitive modes of teaching and learning. And I think that ChatGPT and GPT-4 has been a really interesting catalyst for us to think in this metacognitive way. If we think about the fact that in November last year, ChatGPT didn't even, register in most people's minds, and here we are already, not that many months later, looking at GPT-4. How could we possibly anticipate what our graduates are going to be needing to and expected to work with in terms of these and other tools once they're actually into the world of work and 10 years into their careers? We can't. So what we need to be doing now is shifting our emphasis on helping our students learn how to learn, and specifically learning the evaluative judgment skills that they need to be able to understand the difference between good enough and not yet good enough, and good enough and good, great, and ideally excellent. And that's where still the realm of human skills, human expertise is always going to, well, for the time being at least, is dominating.
Is there a risk of a caste system coming out of this, where you use a chatbot or you use something like this to teach, I'm trying to find words that don't sound demeaning, but skills in training rather than education, where you can use it to teach someone to be a bookkeeper, or indeed teach someone the basics of auto mechanics.
Yeah,
as opposed to.
I see where you're going with this. I mean, I think that's actually a really important question, and one that we do need to have a think about. There's that old joke of, why do you need a drummer? You've got a machine that can do that now. And I think that that's something we do have to stop and think about, is what is the value of asking a human to do something that can now be very easily done by a machine? And we flip that over in terms of the training role that we have. If it is more efficient, more effective for somebody to be trained how to do something by a teacher that is an AI tool, that is infinitely patient and can find 7 or 8 different ways to explain the same concept in different ways with the hope that one of them will work, then what is the value of asking a human to do that? So I think it goes in both directions. I mean, if we go back to that first direction, why are we asking students to learn how to do something that a machine can already do? Now, the analogy I'm using, I don't know if you find this one useful, Stephen, is talking about it as a bit like getting the helicopter to base camp. Right, here's my explanation. Imagine what we're doing here in higher education is asking students to climb Mount Everest. It's a challenging task. It's to reach the pinnacle of their ability. Maybe what we need them to be able to show us they can do is that they can trek to base camp once safely, efficiently, and without, causing any injury to everybody. But maybe we don't need to get them to show us they can trek to base camp every single time they need to climb Mount Everest. Perhaps in the world of work, the professionals who need to climb Mount Everest on a daily basis, they're getting in the helicopter and taking the helicopter to base camp. So my point here is that there may still be some things that we need to know, that students need to know how to do themselves, just so that they have the skills and the evaluative judgment to know what good enough looks like. But perhaps we don't need to get them to show us they can do that every time. And one thing we can reflect on here, Stephen, is that the generation of young people that are, starting primary school this year, we've all seen their photos on Facebook with their, new school bag and their new school shoes and their shiny new lunchbox. That generation is the first generation in history to not experience education without ChatGPT. Or putting it another way, this is the first generation of human beings that have ever lived on the planet whose entire educational experience will be in a world where AI tools like ChatGPT exist. So that is a whole generation of people who are going to be able to come through their learning without having to necessarily learn how to do a lot of these things themselves. We need to make a decision amongst ourselves as people who learn to do this stuff ourselves without ChatGPT. What are the skills that they're still going to need to do, even though ChatGPT can do it for them?
But it could empower the brilliant. I'm sure it's steps away from one being able to ask your ChatGPT to write me a concerto in the style of Duke Ellington's Black on Beige, as if performed by the orchestra of the 18th century. By the way, can you do it using a rock orchestra?
Now, to put those prompts together just then, as you did off the top of your head, you already had to have a baseline knowledge of what those things were. You already had to have the intellectual curiosity to know, I wonder what a mashup like that would sound like. Yeah. Now, you have nothing in your wherewithal to be able to actually hear that mashup other than in your imagination until now, and now you do. And this is kind of the point I'm making. We heard a really interesting response from Nick Cave when ChatGPT launched. One of his fans got it to write a song in the style of Nick Cave and said to him, what do you think? Now, he was able to say, it's not very good. Yeah. But that's because he's Nick Cave. He has taken the time to develop the skills to be able to write a Nick Cave song better than anybody else in the world. So
somebody at Flinders, I think it was Flinders, asked ChatGPT-3 to write a synopsis for a lecture on teaching and learning, as if the introduction was written by Steven Spielberg. What am I saying? Stephen Sondheim, I'm sorry, Stephen Sondheim.
Even better. I mean, either of those would have been great, How
no, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It was, but it had learned enough to get the dissonant rhyme that Sondheim puts in the first 2 lines of a lot of songs. It got that. It was just really ordinary. The scary thing is, of course, it's a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it being asked to write quite a few Shakespearean sonnets, and it has not yet, well, GPT-3 at least had not yet learned Shakespearean rhyme scheme. But I know that because I've studied Shakespeare and I've taught Shakespeare. I mean, I'm not a Shakespeare expert, but I know the basics of Shakespearean rhyme. I know how Shakespearean sonnets are meant to work. So again, this is my point. is that we are of a generation that learned this stuff ourselves. Now, for me personally, I went through my entire university right through to the end of my PhD without the World Wide Web really existing. It was really at the end of my PhD that the World Wide Web started to become a prominent thing. So I am of a generation that learned how to do this sort of thing without the benefit of the World Wide Web. So think about, I'm sort of old Generation X, to put me in that kind of context. Thinking about every generation that has come through since then and what has been available for that generation as they've been learning is changing what it is that they need to learn and how they go about learning it. That's why I draw to mind that primary school kid who's heading off to school on their very first day, because it's this group that are joining the education sector for the first time in their little lives. This is the generation that are crossing that particular threshold. They will be the first generation in human existence to have only had an educational experience in which ChatGPT exists.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if Dr. Johnson was put onto a new, I used to use this argument a lot, but if you put Dr. Johnson on the floor of a newspaper, once he sort of got over electricity, he'd grasp pretty much what you had. And his first question would be, is it a Whig paper or a Tory paper? But now you'd point him at where we are now, and his head would explode.
And I guess this is the point, is that it's accelerating so fast. And in effect, what you're asking me by coming to speak to me today as an academic integrity expert is, I mean, if I can sort of throw a question back to you that you are in effect posing to me, is can the regulatory framework we use to catch student cheating keep up with the tools that are available for them to cheat? And it's getting harder and harder to do that. Regulation is never going to get in front of the technology, but it's almost as if they're creeping further away. So what if we were to get rid of worrying about the technologies and in fact focus our energies in on the two questions? What do our students need to learn in this world where these tools exist? And how do we assure ourselves that they have in fact learned it? They are the two core questions that we need to be able to provide good answers to, rather than can we detect that they've used ChatGPT, or can we detect that they've used a contract cheater? That's the paradigm shift.
Which throws back to the question of who you're using it for. I mean, it just seems to me that it will revolutionize training. It will just expand the Indians' fear of never having enough trainers to train the trainers can probably be partially resolved by this stuff. And that's on one hand, but on the other hand, it can become an absolute elite, intellectual elite process. But the good thing being that the intellectual elite process should be relatively low cost.
I mean, there's a couple of things, I guess, that we need to think about there is, it's one of the sort of well-known paradoxes of AI is that the more things that become AI, the more we value what can only be done by humans. So if we think about the example that OpenAI themselves have offered today, and in partnership with the Khan Academy, they're calling it Khan Migo, which is this Socratic method that you were talking about. If there is a grade school student or a primary school student who is really struggling with some basic maths stuff, this is one of the examples they give themselves. ChatGPT, through this Socratic method or through the Khan Migo approach, is infinitely patient and can ask questions and try different techniques until that person learns. Maybe that is something that we're better off asking a machine to do. But thinking at
it's just fantastic, actually. It's great.
I mean, also, I think there's some Duolingo stuff in terms of learning a language, all that sort of stuff. And that frees up the human time, or the time of humans to do things that only a human can do. Now, of course, that inevitably asks the question is, will that mean we'll need fewer humans? And, obviously the disruption that it might be causing to the world of work. But I guess one of the things that, and we were sort of joking about this in a webinar we did at UNSW, instead of perhaps aiming for Everest, maybe that will allow us to aim for the moon, So this is another thing is, will this allow us human beings to work faster, further, imagine the unimaginable, explore the previously unexplored in ways that we've never been able to before, because it's taking a lot of the cognitive load from us and freeing us up to get to the base camp of Everest more quickly and more easily than we've been able to in the past.
Look, I think that's entirely right. I mean, apart from all the arguments that the internet is Newton Minnow-esque a vast wasteland, may well be so, but it has also transformed everything overall infinitely for the better.
Absolutely.
And if you think about how medical science tackled the pandemic, just the sheer speed with which results, good Lord, and we're just at the beginning. Well, we don't find a way to blow ourselves up with it. It just sounds positive. Look, I could blather on and I'll stop. But let me ask you one question. If a hypothetical vice chancellor came to you and said, this could really be a problem for this hypothetical institution, I have a checkbook. I mean, you'll have to explain that to a number of people. I have a checkbook. It's open. You can, don't tell me the sum, but you can spend what you need. What do you need to do? What would you say?
I would say that I think every, this hypothetical university should take the time to stop and be prepared to reset. And what I mean by reset is to make a decision about every graduate we produce. That's our product, if you like. What do they need to know and be able to do to be safe, competent practitioners in the professions? Now, of course, that could be doctors, dentists, whatever, or it could be Bachelor of Arts graduates, doesn't matter. And what we then need to be able to be prepared to do is to assess that as a whole. In other words, we need to assess their ability to meet the learning outcomes of the whole program of study, the whole degree, as a whole student. It's what's referred to in the pedagogy as programmatic assessment. It's otherwise kind of thought of as holistic assessment. What do I do with that checkbook? Well, first of all, figure out how to use a checkbook, but let's move on. Is what I recognize is to do that, to make that shift away from what we currently do, and that redeployment of energy I was speaking to you about before, to make that shift is going to require some retooling. It's a bit like a factory that is retooling to produce a different product or an updated product. It costs time and money to stop production for a moment and retool. That's what we have to do. We have to retool. And it's a bit like what I was saying before. A lot of the work that now needs to be done can be done by a robot. What we need to be shifting our energies is to have far fewer summative assessment tasks that we use to add up, to grade the final result. We need far fewer of them, but we need far more low or ideally no stakes formative opportunities for students to test their learning. Perfect for a robot to do that. Pick up the human effort from that and move it onto focusing our energies on the stuff that only humans can do, which is that whole of degree, whole of student assessment. Yeah, they're high stakes decisions. So you need more than one person making that decision to be absolutely confident that we're making the correct decision. And we should be focusing those people's energies on exactly that not yet good enough boundary that I was talking about before. We shouldn't be focusing, is this a high distinction student? Oh, no, I don't think so. It's definitely only a distinction student. That's not where we should be putting a lot of our energies. We should be putting our energies in, is this student ready to go out into the world of work, or are they not yet ready? And really making those high stakes assessments in a collaborative fashion with a bunch of humans who can make those judgments at the whole degree, whole of student, and also with the students alongside us as partners in their learning. So that's what I would spend that checkbook on, the retooling and the shifting of our energies away from what we need to do, but a robot can do for us, towards what we need to do in terms of what only humans can do.
In nations with relatively flat social structures and reasonable levels of opportunity across race, class, ethnicity, gender, are the real winners over time in this? I wonder whether they're the curious and the creative. Yeah,
and I think that's one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in the last couple of days. I don't necessarily have a well-formed answer for you, Stephen, but it's exactly where my mind has gone. And it goes back to that paradox, doesn't it, of the more things can be done by a robot, the more we value the things that can only be done by a human. Now, one of the facts of AI, which is generated by machine learning, is it can only learn from what already exists. It is a backward-looking thing. And of course, as humans, we want to be looking forward. We want to be progressing. We want to be developing. And the creativity is all about something new, something different, something innovative. And that's something that if we do get too reliant on AI tools to do everything because of their backward-looking nature, we are at risk of stifling the curiosity and the creativity that drives human progress forward. So I think that that is a very real risk. There are quite a lot of risks that come with over-reliance on AI. A lot of questions about the morality, legality, and ethics of using these tools. And this is exactly what humans with our critical analytical skills should also be questioning and challenging. And the potential to stifle that forward-looking human progress that creativity and curiosity, entrepreneurship and innovation drives is, I think, a very real risk that we need to watch for.
That's a really interesting take, because my assumption that was just intuitively optimistic, that it would be a force for good. But okay, look, I would happily waste the rest of your afternoon talking to you, but I'll let you go. Cath, Ellis, thank you so much for doing this. One of the few joys of Campus Morning Mail is I get to talk to interesting people, and I very much enjoyed this. Let's come back next year and my bot can talk to your bot.
Excellent. Look forward to it.
Thanks, Cath. Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, and we're out.